I'm going to talk about abrupt climate change. It's a completely different thing than the climate change most of us are familiar with. It's obvious at this point that abrupt climate change is underway. I hope you will find this a completely shattering experience. Enlightenment is not a happy feeling. Enlightenment is the destruction of everything you thought to be true. I was shattered in 2002 when I realized we had triggered events that moved us beyond human control and would lead to our extinction in the not very distant future. Enlightenment is not for the faint of heart. For the entire history of the field of astrophysics, astrophysicists and all the rest of us believed we were right in the Goldilocks zone in terms of the distance of Earth from our sun, from the star. And then it was only about 3 years ago that it was discovered that the Earth is actually on the inner edge of the habitable zone for a sun with the characteristics of our star, of our sun. That's Venus, that is the yellow plus sign, and we know what happened to Venus with respect to its atmosphere. So this indicates we're within 1% of being pushed out of the habitable zone, within 1%. Very close to the sun, much closer to the sun than we imagine, which suggests that relatively minor changes in atmospheric chemistry will push us out of the habitable zone. Well, we haven't made minor changes in atmospheric chemistry on this planet. We've made major changes. Methane levels, a very powerful greenhouse gas, methane atmospheric levels are more than 240% above the level they were at the beginning of the Industrial Revolution, about 1750. Carbon dioxide levels are about 40% higher than they were at the beginning of the Industrial Revolution. So we have made major changes in atmospheric chemistry. Also from the astrophysics community, from the planetary sciences perspective, CO2-induced forcing, this is from a paper just a couple of months ago, it's discovered that CO2-induced forcing as readily destabilizes the climate of water-rich rock-like planets as does stars that are going nova or supernova. So we don't have to have the energy of the sun increase. Indeed, we can just mess with the atmospheric chemistry of the planet and it produces the same result. Climate instability, which is caused by cloud feedback, I'll talk a little bit more about that later, leads to a new steady state that's about 57 degrees Celsius. That's a problem. We're currently at about 15 degrees Celsius, and in the last 2 billion years of the planet's history, we've never been above 23 degrees Celsius. So 57 is a big deal. Basically, the planet has experienced two relatively stable states over the course of the last 2 billion years. Ice age, 12 degrees Celsius, global average, and 22 degrees Celsius, above average, hothouse, or Jurassic Park, or dinosaur days, or whatever you want to call it. Evidence that abrupt climate change is underway is provided by NASA recently, whereas it took the first 265 years of the Industrial Revolution. The first 265 years, from 1750 to September of 2015, during that 265 years, the global average temperature rose 1 degree Celsius. And in the next 4 months, it increased an additional 0.57 degrees Celsius. This is what the exponential function looks like. What we experience in our daily lives is the near future looks a lot like the recent past. And that's been the case for our entire lives, for our entire history as a species. The next few days always look like the last few days. Until now. More evidence that abrupt climate change is underway and has cracked the mainstream media, including in The Guardian less than a month ago, Climate Central. And you can see the evidence right here. 2010 was the hottest year on record until 2014 came along, and then until 2015 came along, 2014 was the hottest year on record, and 2016 we're blowing everything away. In addition, there's a 10-year lag between emissions of carbon dioxide and maximum heating associated with carbon dioxide, thus guaranteeing that the next 10 years will be hotter than any previous 10 years in history. So we're at the early stages of abrupt climate change, and it's an event that has precedence in Earth's history, not in our history, but in Earth's history. Typically, you can see there's been pretty rapid changes from one state to another, and those stages are as rapidly as a 5 degrees Celsius global average temperature rise in a span of 13 years, according to a paper in the Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences. This is fast. This is what we're talking about. This is during the Paleocene-Eocene thermal maximum. Climate changes during the PETM occurred over much longer time periods than what we're experiencing now as a result of anthropogenic climate change. And that's the case before we hit abrupt climate change. Even before we hit the abrupt phase, when we were still in the Al Gore linear style climate change that we all heard about and learned about in school, even at that point, the climatic changes during the PETM occurred over much longer temporal spans than what we're observing today. So the effects of the latter may thus even be more severe. In finalist for the understatement of the year, may be less severe. This is science speak for you. Everything's just a little bit more conservative than reality. Anthropogenic carbon release is unprecedented during the last 66 million years. It's actually occurring about 10 times faster. Carbon dioxide release into the atmosphere is occurring about 10 times faster than it did during the PETM, when the global average temperature rose at 1.5 degrees Celsius in 13 years. Climate change and abrupt climate change are two outcomes or consequences or symptoms of civilization. Civilization is a heat engine. It's an indication of our overshoot. Civilization is the handgun of the city pointed at the face of nature. Civilization means cities. Once you commit to cities, you've committed to human population overshoot, because the area in the city is not sufficiently able to grow the food, provide the water, provide the air for the people who are living there. You're an overshoot when you live in a city. And we are committed, addicted. It's the only thing we've ever known. The last several thousand years on the planet have been characterized by various civilizations. We were all born into captivity. We were born into the captivity of civilization that started up some 265 years ago. We didn't get to choose. We didn't get to vote. We just showed up at this time in history, which is pretty incredible because it's the most amazing, awesome time in history. We have these digital devices that allow us to find out more things than we ever could before at the snap of a finger. And also, we get to be here at the end.